product data might exist in 5 different places completely differently and probably 20 spreadsheets. So as soon as you move into a world where you want to automate, let's say, product data between systems, suddenly things don't match and automation's impossible. So actually what starts off as an automation project actually shifts into a product data project.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-com strategy, technology and CX focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialist James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-com strategy of leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This episode is sponsored by Shopify. Got a really interesting and important topic today. So we're going into the back office world and we're going to the side of the operational part of e-commerce businesses, which is hugely important because you can put the best markets in the world out there, but if your operations aren't fit for purpose and able to scale and support like massive increases in orders or increases in data flows, then you end up with a lot of problems and it's very hard to retrospectively fix. So we've got a well-known industry thought leader who is the CEO of HighCohesion, which is one of the leading integration platforms for fast-growing brands. So warm welcome to Aran. How are you doing?
Hey, James. Thanks for having me on. Yes, all good. I am here in sunny Barcelona. Sorry to rub it in so early at the beginning of the podcast, but really good to be here.
Yeah, that's your gloating done. I'm not going to listen to anymore. It's when I'm in really rainy, drizzly Ascot where nobody's smiling today. So we've got completely contrary. But look, thanks for joining. So I'll let you do a bit of introduction in a minute, but we're going to talk about operational transformation, how to plan effectively and minimize risk based on your size and tech maturity. Sounds like a mouthful, but this is really important because how you plan operationally really is dependent on what size of business and where you are in your maturity growth. And you can be a like fast growth brand with hundreds and hundreds of millions, but have relatively simple tech stack, or you could be a 20 to 30 million retailer, have a really complex tech stack depending on your operational side. So it's really important we tease this out. So Aran, do you want to give people a bit of a flavor for who you are and where HighCohesion sits in the market?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for the introduction. I'm CEO, co-founder of HighCohesion. So we're a UK-based integrations platform as a service. The acronym, which you might have heard, is iPaaS. And we work with large and enterprise, fast-growing brands all around the world. Basically, we make sure that our brands' tech stacks stay connected as they grow and also as they evolve. The way I like to kind of frame who are we for. So when we're speaking to brands, if anyone brand side, head of ops, CFO, ecom director is answering yes to any of these questions, it probably suggests that maybe we're a good fit for them. So questions like, are manual processes slowing down your operations today? Are complex requirements like tax or customs and duties calculations or promotions or bundles a headache when data moves between systems today? Does maybe your gut tell you, or have you got the data telling you that your team's spending way too much time reconciling data between platforms, let's say ecom platform down to ERP or WMS? And then lastly, are you as a brand facing any challenges scaling processes across geographies or channels? You know what it is you want to do as you referred to from a marketing and a front office perspective, but actually making that happen operationally in reality is a challenge. So typically the brands that we work with, the size they're at, are normally answering yes, probably to all of those questions. And that's where we come in and play a role in helping from a data perspective and that kind of connection perspective. But we've also got an amazing team of e-com experts who are based all around the world. We're a remote company. And we're not just taking data from A to B. We're also thinking about actually what does best practice look like from order to cash process, for example, for a particular kind of size and type of brand. Yeah, and just lastly, the business is 6 years old. I started the business with my two co-founders, Luke Hodgson and Andy Slater. So we have been kind of growing steadily over those 6 years, and we also run the consultancy, commerce thinking that's focused from a consultancy's perspective, the same kind of space on the tech and ops side as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that introduction, and let's get into the fun part around operational transformation and how this impacts brands differently depending on size and complexity. So we're going to start on talking about established brands, and then we're going to go on to, like, I guess, newer brands that are fast growing. So when we look at an established brand, this is like businesses with strong operational teams. So they've got resource there, they've got structure, they'll have decent tech stack maturity. But we all know that with tech stack maturity, you often get a lot of legacy debt into that, bringing efficiency. When they're trying to modernize, improve, how do they take the learnings of what's made them successful and got them to where they are today, but apply those to being able to deliver new projects faster? Because one of the struggles I often see in this type of business is speed to market. So sometimes those more mature tech stacks and those more robust processes can slow them down when they're like launching a US warehouse to support expansion in the US. So what is your approach? How do you help people to get to market quicker within that environment?
Yeah, good question. So I think, firstly, what do we define as HighCohesion as an established brand? I would say in kind of pure financial metrics, probably a brand that's 50 million GVP upwards. And certainly we're seeing brands embed technology and processes much, much more at that kind of stage, all the way from kind of the people side of having a management structure, distinct teams, roles and responsibilities. But firstly, I think the things that really help an established brand. So number one, data tends to be good or better than a younger and maybe faster growing brand. So product data is solid, because if it's not, then, you're going to have a real challenge having got to that size in the first place. So data tends to be consistent across systems. There's not this continual scramble to make data match. Projects like launching a US warehouse, for example, are really kind of treated as projects, not as side hustles. So in a smaller brand, people are often doing projects kind of off the side of their desk. In a bigger brand, they're very much more planned. There's actually resource carved out. People's time is carved out. You might even have a dedicated project team. I would say the providers at those largest brands, so the vendors or the logistic partners, the agencies, tend to be tier one. So they tend to be partners that have gone through the same process many, many times, and their ability to, bring a process in and say, this is how we're going to do it, and here's where we might tweak and change it for your specific use case, massively speeds things up. And I think crucially, if we look at something like launching a US warehouse, we've recently helped a couple of brands, LSKD Australia in Australia and Adanola in the UK, go through a similar thing. The overall change to the business is incremental. So actually bringing in a new warehouse, is a much, much smaller change for a brand of that size than a brand that's at kind of 10, 15 million pound mark. So the ability for the business to absorb change is much, much greater for a bigger business. As a smaller business, absorbing like a change like that is much, much more transformational. So I think that's what helps it go well at an established brand. But as you rightly called out, I think for established brands also, they can be very, very fixed to a current process. So, for example, the whole finance department might be based around UK tax, UK customs and way of treating customs and duties. And suddenly when you've got a business that's growing in the US and you've got a US tax nexuses that you need to set up and you're hitting state thresholds for tax, to completely shift how a business does something like that from a finance perspective, also can be slower than a smaller, kind of more nimble team.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
And one of the things that I see in large businesses, and I've worked with businesses like you of all different shapes and sizes, from like startups through to multi-100 million pound businesses. And one of the big challenges operationally I see is maintaining quality and efficiency as they scale. So they might have a process that works for handling refunds, for example, and then they go international and they add in multiple return points, and there might be consolidation, and then actually managing that process, managing the SLA with customers can change, and the impact on the systems can change. And one of the ways that sometimes people react to it is to throw more people. So it's, okay, if we put more people, like new skills or more senior people, that will improve it. And it doesn't always, because that can slow decision making down, or it can also compound the problem because it might not be a human one. So I'd love to hear what you work with so many different businesses. What are the things you see? How do you help people to maintain quality and efficiency in their back office processes when they are going through like transformations that scale?
Yeah, good question. So from our perspective, one thing we're really, really hot on is going in and helping a brand, or us understanding what does a brand's kind of standard operating procedures look like. And if they don't exist, actually, we want to tease them out of people and help them document them. So for our own requirements, we need to obviously be aware of them. Integrations, as much as people talk about them being flexible and adaptable, at the end of the day, they're pretty kind of rigid in what's going to work in an integration and what's going to break it. So understanding those standard operating procedures as a business is really, really important. And I think as new people come into that business, the way they'll succeed is by business having great documentation. So if that doesn't exist, we're often seeing in brands that actually somebody comes in from, let's say, they've come in from an enterprise level brand, and they've come into a brand that's established but smaller than enterprise. One of the first things we're seeing them do is ask, okay, where is this and this documented? Quite often it's missing entirely, which you're probably familiar with. And the first 6 months of their role will just be documenting the basics. Which is, it's one of the benefits of having a fresh face and a fresh mind in the business, definitely. And that helps then, having that in place helps onboarding of new people thereafter. They've actually got something they can reference as the kind of baseline of how we do things. I think linked to that is spending human time and being curious. I think the teams that we succeed when more and more people are joining a team quickly is where there's really curious minds in each one of those new seats. In our world, in the world of retail, things move and change so quickly that if you're not curious and you just expect stuff to come to you, you're always going to be one step behind. So I think when we see new team members join the brands that we work with, the ones that really succeed are the ones that are curious. They're reaching out to us. They want to spend time with us working out how the integrations work. Why did we do this project? What's our view on maybe what could be improved from a tech or ops perspective in the business? And then I would also just add that recognition from an established brand, or as a brand starting to become established, is that I guess what's got them there in the past isn't maybe going to be the same to get them where they want to go in the future. So they may not have had at this point lots and lots of rigor when they change something. They may not be kind of testing obsessed before they set a new process or technology live. They may not have any SLAs for certain things, and now they need to, because otherwise processes fall over and customers get annoyed. And planning may have been a bit haphazard or last minute, let's say, up until this point. And actually, when you're an established brand, you actually need to get into a planning cycle. So although let's say we've worked on a US 3PL migration recently that kind of really start to finish was 4 weeks. It was very, very fast for a £80 million brand. Actually, the planning to get that going, the vendor selection, the commercial agreements, the putting the requirements in front of that 3PL happened months and months before that.
Yeah, I'm glad you teased out the point of ad documentation, because I think this is something where, and it's not all large businesses are good at this, but some, especially legacy ones, seem to be enterprising to be very, very good at having lots of documents. They might not be necessarily updated frequently enough, but I think this is where SME market can learn massively, especially in D2C brands that are like really scaling quickly. Is the bit that I see really poorly documented is business process. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of processes in businesses, but it's even down to the minutiae. Like customer notifications is a great one of what triggers a notification, what system is sending it, what template is that. Do you have all the right notifications set up? Do you have all the right systemic flows set up to receive data points to trigger it in the right place? Do you have to do customization because you don't have an event that's recognized in one system to trigger the notification you need to send out based on an update somewhere else? And you get an amazing amount of technical solution work that's done, but then it's not documented. And then you've got nothing to go back to say, right, okay, let's review this in 12 months. Are we missing something? Is this right? Do we need to make a change? And it's something that is underestimated in projects. And because I think people see it as a hassle and a cost. How, out of interest, when you get involved in these projects, to what degree of quality do you see process flow documentation? And is it an area that you try and get them to focus on more as in the client teams?
Yeah, well, actually, I was just about to ask you the same question of how you seen it done well, so we can come on to that. So it varies massively. It's the minority, and it's still a surprise and a delight when we start working with a brand, and even in that pre-sales perspective, they are like, okay, here's a document on how we do it today, and here's where we think we want to get to. I would say that's probably 1 in 20 brands we speak to have something like that. And when it comes along, it's fantastic, right? Because it moves things along quicker. But it also makes sure that right from the off, like our objectives are aligned with what the business wants out of what we're doing. If that doesn't exist, then we will help brands with that to an extent. So we will help them map out how data is flowing between systems today and how it should be. We will tease out edge cases and the things that make that brand unique. We will tease out, what tripped them over last Black Friday and work out ways to avoid that this year. So we will do that in our kind of what we call the solution design process, which is what we do before we go and build any integration at all. But also there comes a ceiling, right, where us as a iPaaS provider, we kind of have then a bit of a blurred line of where we start to become kind of consultancy and advisory. And you probably start to have an element of us having a little bit of a conflict of interest, because I think what makes us do a good job is kind of that pressure and input from the customer. If we also become that, then sometimes we're kind of marking our own homework a little bit, if that makes sense. So at that point, I think we're getting better at having a trigger point to going out to other people. So it might be, a Shopify agency that's experts in how this part of Shopify works, or a tech or ops agency, the likes of Commerce Thinking, for example, or a logistics agency with, the likes of the team at Chris Ormond and the For Now team, for example. So at some point, I think we're getting much better at saying, actually, here's probably where we need to draw the line. We could help a brand probably through some of the decision making, but actually here's experts who I think will hold them accountable probably a little bit better than we would. What about you? I'm interested to hear your point of view on that as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure what my ratio is of who has it locked down versus those who don't. I don't find many have really good consistent documentation. I think that's the starting point. And it's not through because people don't care. It's because people get distracted. So I find the project documentation is normally good. When somebody does a big project, they'll have it documented, the scope, the requirements, the solution. But what doesn't happen is the evolution of documentation as businesses evolve and change. So you then get to the next project cycle and you've just got process debt, and tech solution debt everywhere because it's not in sync. And then you're almost like starting from scratch again because you don't know where your starting point is without sitting down and going through it. So I think that's what I find. In terms of when it's done well when somebody's willing to pay for a resource in a project to address this. And that you need someone with a BA mindset, a business analyst.
Yeah.
Because traditional PMs can add their weight in gold to projects by coordinating, distilling, adding value and advice. But they often don't have the BA skill set of being able to, scrutinize an in-depth process and map it and document it, because visualizing process flows is actually quite challenging. I know there are tools out there that help you do it. I'm definitely not good at it. What I do though is I guess I provide an interim thing. So I will help clients. So I've mapped out like processes for creation and uploading of products, and it's very basic. I'm not an advanced flow builder in the way that a true BA would be to make it a really seamless process map. But I'll do something like Google Slides, and I'll just go, right, here you go. This is a process we agree. These are the principles. So I guess I come at it from if you've got nothing, you don't have that resource, then it's at least to get the principles sound and have some level of visualization, because when you're in a functional workshop and you're trying to sign off on what you need, I just find without any visual, it's really difficult for a lot of people to conceptualize, because I say that sounds good, but actually they're not thinking about it in terms of how that flow plays out. They're just thinking if that sounds functionally okay. When you've got it drawn out again, right, we're now here and this is what's happening and this is the customer impact and this is what you've got to do in the system and this is now going to impact this other third party over here for that campaign. Then they stop and go, oh, man, that's not how we need it to work. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess that's probably my rambling answer.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think that's what it comes down to a lot of the time, right? Is that if at least your project is about decision making, and can you align everyone to a single decision? And something spoken or written is one thing, but visualizing it, definitely really powerful.
Yeah, well, I'm just going through a process with a client of mine at the moment and doing a re-platforming and helping them. And it's about one thing's come up is what's the final set of notifications, because we're trying to simplify. And actually what we're doing is I'm going to put a little map together on Monday, which is here's all the ones that I've understood from all the workshops. Here's what I think's driving it systemically. This is triggers. This is the number of templates we need. And this is the customer touch points. What are we missing? Because it's so much easier than people trying to relate to 6 workshop set of notes and going, have we got it all covered? So, well, let's move on to, we've talked about like larger brands or established brands. Let's talk about fast growth, because a lot of our audience on this podcast is more in that D2C, SME space, several million up to, maybe 30 to 50 million. And some of them, this last year has been all about international expansion. And we all know what fun that's been with the US and tariffs. For others, it's about expansion into B2B and consolidating B2B and B2C on the same platform, and then looking at what the impact is to the back office flows and the fulfillment and the challenges and the logistics around that. So there's lots of different dynamics that then suddenly take somebody out of their core comfort zone to, we've got bigger problems to solve. How do we do this? I'd love to hear from you when you're working with these fast growth brands. They might have lots of manual processes, some automations. What are the key challenges you see, and what is your advice? How do you help them try and future-proof?
Yeah, great question. So I think one of the key things versus the larger brands where stuff is maybe documented or visible somewhere, like what we were just talking about, in smaller brands, you have people that have maybe been there since the beginning. They are the experts on how a certain system or process or supplier relationship or whatever it is works, which is great. They're the kind of powerhouses that have grown these brands, but stuff is in those people's heads. So you have this single person risk where if you need to communicate something to a new team member or a new supplier, or you're looking at, okay, this is broken, how do we then fix it? You've got to extricate that from people's heads. And those people are busy, right? They're flat out probably doing 5 roles. So I think that's one of the tough things, is that versus a bigger business where there are more people who kind of have an understanding of the same thing. In a smaller business, it's that kind of single person risk stuff is in people's heads. A massive one is data tends to be messier in the smaller, fast growing brands. So product data might exist in 5 different places completely differently, and probably 20 spreadsheets. So as soon as you move into a world where you want to automate, let's say, product data between systems, suddenly things don't match and automation's impossible. So actually what starts off as an automation project actually shifts into a product data project. And I say that's a fast growth brands. We actually see the same thing at brands that are doing hundreds of million as well. So, as soon as data sets are different, it's tough, but typically that tends to be a more of a problem at smaller brands, I would say, where stuff is moved from a non-joined up world to wants to move to a joined up world. And I guess on that point is that systems, processes, people even don't tend to be as joined up in smaller brands. So that means that there's always this element of manual process, whether you're moving data or whatever it is, that always will take up a chunk of time until you've automated it. So actually scaling is always then a little bit linear, because as you scale, you need more hours in the day or more people in the team to move data. So that's one thing. I would say that we're also seeing small projects, when you add all that up, can seem like a bit of a mountain to climb to smaller brands, and you can get into this kind of decision paralysis vicious cycle where actually every project seems too big, so we'll just keep going how we're going. We know it's kind of broken, but actually versus committing 2 months to this when we've got 2 months that we could dedicate to something else is a tricky decision. And I think that prioritization is really important. At some point, somebody's just got to make the decision and just say, look, guys, if we don't fix this, we're going to hit ceiling. So yeah, I would say all of those things sounds a bit doom and gloom, but all of those things added together, I would say, are the kind of key challenges we see in that kind of 5 to 20 million range.
Yeah, that completely resonates for me. Question for you actually on this, because in those businesses, you do not have experienced project management resource, right? PMO stuff doesn't exist. That's larger businesses will have like some consistent resource. And therefore, people are running projects, but they're not potentially structured project managers who have full PMO expertise, running races, risk charters, governance. When you get into this business now going to the next step, and it's got a transformation and that's got lots of dependencies and systems decisions, etc. How do you find that many of them are then at the point where they go, yes, okay, we're willing to have a PM, or do you find yourselves having to go in and try and like educate people about perhaps now you need to bring in a PM to run this for you?
Much more the latter. So I would say, even at larger brands, the kind of PM role is rare. And I would see normally what we see is that it becomes somebody in the team's role to kind of, I'm going to manage this project. They're not project managers. They are fantastic head of operations. They are fantastic ecom managers. Sometimes it can, even be a CFO has become the project manager for a project, and it doesn't quite add up. So more often than not, that is the case. We are seeing, though, I would say a small but growing number of independent project managers in the brands that we work with. So we work with some great people. So recently worked on a project at Ancient and Brave, the supplements brand, massively fast growing. Have put in new systems, expanded to new markets, and we worked with Emma Forward, who I think you know. And she was the project manager, slash business analyst slash a couple of other roles in the work we did with them. But yeah, a really important go-between between us, the other vendors in the mix, and then the Ancient and Brave team themselves. And I think without her, that would have been really, really challenging. And yeah, we're seeing a couple of other people now increasingly play that role. And it's been great for us because we now have this small but growing pool of people that we can see a project needs it. And we can say to a brand, look, guys, we've done this now tens, hundreds of times. The role missing here is this. Here are the roles and responsibilities. Can you tell me somebody in the business has this against their job description for the next 6 months? If they don't, there's a gap, and we know from experience this is going to fall over. I think, yeah, being able to do that now through our past experience, but also then say we can recommend these fantastic people who can help fill that gap has been really strong.
Yeah, it's such an important discipline is you start with your RACI. That's the critical that you need, your project roles and responsibilities, and you map people to them. And if you don't have the right skill or you don't have somebody who can fill those roles, it's a risk. That then increases the risk profile. And it's amazing actually how you can change the dynamic. Because when I've had this conversation with people before, and I think in my early days, I probably didn't couch it the right way. And it's like, you need a project manager, it's going to cost X. People turn off. You turn around and go, here's your project RACI, here's the responsibilities. These are the 4 roles that you do not have covered. And this is the risk of the project. And this is the potential risk to you commercially if you don't have an adequate cover for it. And all of a sudden you flip that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that needs to be somebody independent, or they need to be brand side. We will manage a project. An ERP provider will manage a project. A Shopify agency will manage a project. But at the end of the day, one of those partners can't manage an entire migration, ecom migration or ERP implementation, because, kind of what I said earlier, you're kind of marking your own homework at the end of the day. Somebody needs to be responsible who's independent of the third parties in the mix, right?
Yeah, I think that's sound advice. And also I think that actually helps like critical strategic partners like yourselves be more effective, because you don't then, you're focusing on delivery and collaboration. And you know that there's a trusted person who's going to ensure that you get the inputs you need to deliver, and that if there's any change, it's managed effectively so that you're not constantly having to handhold a client on top of delivery, because I don't think that's a fair expectation on a third party either. I think it just blurs the boundaries too much.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would add is what we're talking about here is all kind of project and pre-go live. I think it's also really important to consider what happens post-go live. Let's say, an iPass is going into a brand, HighCohesion is going into a brand, or an ERP is going into the brand for the first time. The project's one thing, but who is going to run, manage, monitor, fix, tweak, improve those systems once they've gone live as well? Again, will it be something off the side of somebody's desk? Maybe for smaller systems, but if you're putting in an ERP for the first time, or you are, putting in a WMS for the first time where maybe previously you've been using the back of Shopify or something else, you need to have somebody who's knows how to use that system effectively. So I think we're also seeing like the kind of systems admin, systems manager role become really important in businesses as they kind of lean more and more on tech to do these things.
Yeah. Let's talk about transformation processes as well, because typically when a brand is growing, it involves multiple partners. They could have an ERP partner on top of an integration partner like yourselves. They could have a separate person like handling other parts of the tech stack. They could have a third party consultant in on there. Who knows how many different parties there might be from tech and process and consultancy. I'm managing that as a challenge. And you've obviously been working with lots of different businesses across different sizes on different levels of projects. I'd love to know what is the advice and what have you learned about how do you manage these processes across multiple partners to make sure that you get good cohesion?
Yeah, it's interesting because that starts rearing its head in the sales process. Like we go in, let's say we have a 2-page MSA, we have a short statement of work. Somebody like a NetSuite goes in, they've got 80-page T's and C's. The statement of work is another 100 pages, so on and so on. So that actually, immediately you've got this mismatch between how different partners and providers do things simply, even at that very early stage. So there's a couple of things that I think have really helped us. One is really, really early alignment on what's the overall business outcome here. Like, why the hell are we doing this thing in the first place? And what's that single point we're aiming towards, on how we define whether this has all been a success or not, and keep revisiting that all the time. Just say, actually, if we're going off on this tangent or somebody's got this really rigorous and slightly tiring process, is this actually feeding into getting us as a collective where we want to go? So I think that constant alignment of why you're here is important. I think being transparent early on, and everyone actually, in what's been really powerful for us is in pre-sales in ERP projects, for example, we now kind of mandate that we're spending a whole day aligning with the brand and with the other partners in a room together on what does our process look like? What does our project management look like? What does our governance look like? And saying, actually, you will get this from us. You won't get this from us. You will get this from these guys. You won't get this from these guys. And just everyone being aware up front before we start anything so there's no surprises. So I think that spending time, human time in person, talking through that's important. But fundamentally, one of the things I'm proud of, I think most, is that we are normally the most flexible in the room. So if we need to rise up or suppress something down or change something or meet somebody else's way of working, then we will be flexible. That's, I think, one of the things that makes our projects happen and succeed rather than kind of hitting a wall and failing time and time again, is that at some point we'll say, look, we can see that somebody needs to be flexible here, and we will take that on. And I think having somebody in the mix, if it's, having somebody in the mix that can be the most flexible in the room is important as well. They tend to be the partner or the team that becomes the glue and holds everything together.
Yeah, and I guess it's quite nice given the product positioning. That's essentially what you're doing technically. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. One of the things that always comes up is that people don't know what they don't know. And I get this conversation a lot where I'm with a client and I do a lot of, I've done some projects similar to Emma, who's a brilliant consultant as well. So anyone listening, she's well worth having on your books to reach out to. And a lot of the questions we all get as independent consultants are, okay, what are the things we need to think about? What don't we know? Which is always a hard one to know how you concisely do it. So let's talk about how you help, what you've learned and how you help customers plan around potential issues. What are the common issues that you see in the types of projects you work on, and what can client teams do to better prepare?
Yeah, so common issues. So let's say integrations are up and running between systems. They're kind of day-to-day successful. What comes along and breaks them? Many things. We could be here all day talking about that. But I think if we were to group them, so I think one is business events. So what do I mean by that? Peak. So Black Friday. or for a kind of more of a hype-based brand, a new drop or a VIP sale or whatever it is, but where you get these kind of peak events and peak volumes, and actually what's worked 364 days of the year suddenly breaks when you've got 100 times the volume going through it. I mean, we work with some brands that maybe do, let's say, 1,000 orders a day. And then at peak moments, they might do 200,000-300,000. And you get this massive delta between what's normal and then what's kind of this more, not anomalous because they are planned events, but those kind of peak events. So things can break at peak, and building that robustly into integrations is hard. So you kind of take two approaches. You either build for that kind of one-off event, and the rest of the year is just kind of massively overspec'd, as it were. Or you spend time more closely with the brands, and this is, I think, what we're doing more and more of. So road mapping, working out actually what does a marketing calendar look like, but also road mapping around what does your business change look like? Are you planning a new system? Are you thinking of changing returns providers? Are you going to a new geography or channel? And us understanding that in advance means that we can actually proactively suggest how the integrations should change and adapt to meet how the business is changing and adapting. So I think that kind of, road mapping and understanding things in advance. Around peak this year, we've, from each of our brands, got pretty detailed forecasts of what they're expecting through peak and when. So again, that we've taken that and gone and checked every integration setup and said, actually, is what's set up for the brand today going to meet this kind of forecast calendar that we've got, and obviously have some buffer in it as well. I think also one of the things, very common problems, is that there can be changes in one part of the system that brands don't always think through end to end. So classic example came up actually earlier this week. We work with a really fast growing jewelry provider, and they do personalization on their jewelry. And they wanted to just change how that personalization was kind of captured on the front end. But you can imagine personalization for a piece of jewelry needs a very exact format to be then sent to the warehouse when they engrave it on this tiny piece of jewelry. That changed on the front end, and then suddenly the warehouse was just getting either no personalization or the incorrect personalization on their orders. Customers started flagging that, either my necklace has not come through engraved or that it's missing. And, when we spoke to the brand, they said, oh yeah, we didn't even think about how that would impact anything downstream. It just felt like an innocent enough front end change. I think those small changes not thought through, when everything is integrated and automated, can have that end to end impact. And then lastly, I would probably say the other bucket is the kind of time to value can differ massively across different types of, let's say, softwares or providers. So order editing, app at the moment, those guys can onboard a brand super quickly. Fantastic team, great app. That can happen very quickly. But sometimes it might be that a mirrored change needs to happen in the OMS or in the 3PL or the ERP, and order editing might be able to make the change in 5 minutes, but with one of those providers, you need to raise a ticket. Somebody then needs to resource that ticket, come back and clarify what's on that ticket, schedule the change in the test environment, then deploy it in production. And that time to value between, one app is selling, we can make this happen in 5 minutes. Absolutely they can, but actually sometimes how that then has a knock-on effect in other systems can be much slower. So I think for brands need to be realistic about changes. And you can't plan everything in advance, but just think about actually as you grow to a bigger brand, you've got a bigger tech stack, you've got more processes, that things will just take longer.
Yeah, I think that's such an important one to pull out, the knock-on implications of changes. And Yeah, I see this on many occasions in ecom where somebody wants to make a decision, but that decision then has an impact. Say, for example, they want to change something function in the front end, but that then impacts product data model, for example. And that product data model needs to be reworked. Therefore, you've got to think about, does that reworking of the product data model have an impact on other systems that are dependent on the data? Where's that data mastered? And does that therefore need to be changed at that source? And it's just, I think sometimes people underestimate, don't they, that, and it's not criticism. It's just, if you haven't gone through that process, you don't know that this could happen. Is the iceberg thing. The surface is great, but what's underneath that's going to cause you massive problems. And then coming back to that point you said about, the roles of an independent, so like Emma in a project, having somebody where somebody can take the time to stop and go, right, let me look at what the impact is and come back and say, like, okay, do we need to involve other third parties in this conversation, or can we just go ahead and execute that? I think that's where having that structured like project management, whatever you want to call it, resource and skill is massively valuable.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's flip to talk about your technology, your platform. You're an iPaaS provider. You work with lots of different brands. You're constantly involving your proposition. I'd love to hear, where's HighCohesion headed strategically? And then I guess from a functionality, a feature wise, what are you concentrating on? Because I know you've been building out strategic partnerships. I know you've announced the Loop partnership relatively recently. So yeah, just talk everyone through like where you're headed.
Yeah, the big question. So I think, let me start with partnerships. So why are partnerships important to us? Well, I think probably consistent message with every partnership, but we do not have a strong outbound growth strategy in place at the moment. A lot of our growth is partnership oriented. So we put a lot of time and effort into partnerships and understanding how can we solve a pain for our partners? What can we take away from them to enable them to do their job better and make them look better in the eyes of the customer, frankly. And also enable them a quicker kind of time to value or go to market as well. So yeah, working with the likes of Loop, we're also doing more and more work with Swap, another returns provider. We have a growing number of partnerships with a number of consultancies, agencies, other software providers, where they want to focus on what makes their software great. They don't want to focus on integrating that software into every ERP or WMS or ecom platform. So we're kind of moving more and more into helping those partners solve integration challenges. So we will understand the nuts and bolts of their system and help them integrate quickly into the kind of core systems or the most common systems that their customers have. So we're doing more and more of that with partners. If it's a logistics partner, we're working out, okay, how can we help you onboard a brand quicker that's like really deep rooted into their existing WMS or 3PL, and they want to now expand into a new market quickly. So we're basically saying, new 3PL, you don't need to really worry about how the brand does tech and integrations brand side. We'll just focus on how we can make that work with you as the new 3PL, for example. So partnership's really important. Strategically, also, we're thinking about new channels and new markets. So I think we predominantly work with Shopify brands today. We see that Centra, Stockholm-based ecom platform, matches our ICP really, really well. And we are spending an increasing amount of time with them working out, again, how can we help solve those integrations, especially at the more kind of complex end of things. New markets. So most of our brands still today are UK-based brands. We have an increasing number in the US, Australia, New Zealand, and we see those as two growing markets, and also Northern Europe as well. And then I would say lastly, we want to shrink our time to value for customers. So our projects they take on the complex stuff, but we see brands wanting to be more reactive than kind of what we can offer today. So we're thinking really hard and making changes on how can we shrink time to value for customers that want to react to tariff changes or this sudden opportunity in a new channel. They want to do that kind of in hours or days rather than weeks or months. So I think shrinking that time to value is a big focus for the coming year as well.
Yeah, I just think that's such a broader trend in the market generally. People are under lots of pressures. It's still tough trading conditions, and there's so much volatility, like at the macro level, isn't there? Like crazy people around the world. So I think that's time to value is. I'd see so many conversations now shifting a bit more away from cost. I mean, cost is still important because you have budgets and you can't just suddenly like add another 50 grand to your cost line. But yeah, that how quickly can you get value and what is the value defined at? Because the value could be defined at improving efficiency in the business so that it takes you half an hour to do a task rather than an hour, and that's your value. And you can get there in the next 3 months. So yeah, that resonates a lot with me and the conversations I'm having, and also how I try and like talk people through, especially at the senior leadership team level, about the benefit of new systems. Not trying to evangelize them and say they're perfect because they're not, but why? What can you do and what's the business value?
Yeah, exactly.
I could carry on asking you questions for hours because I'm just one of those annoying consultants, Aran, but I know you have a very busy day ahead of you as well. So I'll stop there. But if somebody wants to discuss a potential project and wants to find out a bit more, I guess, technically, operationally, how HighCo sits within the wider systems architecture, how do they reach out? How do they get more info?
So obviously, go onto our website, HighCohesion.com. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or by email. We love talking to people. So, just a chat. Maybe you've got a problem that you're looking to solve, and it might not be directly integration related, but we've seen a lot of problems across a lot of brands. So if we don't know the answer, we can probably point you in the direction of somebody who will. But yeah, that's what I'd recommend definitely is just having a chat with us. And we're very open to, putting you in touch with other customers of ours as well, who may have gone through similar kind of challenges and can maybe talk through how we've helped them. But yeah, that's what I say is just, we're absolutely here to chat, really kind of hot on that kind of human time. So reach out.
Excellent. And Aran's contact details are on the landing page for a podcast on our website and insidecommerce.fm. So you can find his LinkedIn profile there. Aran, always love chatting to you. Or really enjoying watching HighCohesion's story and success and the brands you're working with. So thanks for joining today.
Thanks for making the time, James, and have a good rest of the day. Cheers.
Yeah. And thanks to everyone for listening. Take care, everyone. Until next week. You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.